Hey Gloomers, and welcome back to Nerdhaven. My name is Mike, and today we're going to be talking about 5 strategies that your party can use to get better at Gloomhaven. Before we get started, I just want to say if this is your first time watching one of my videos, take a look at my other content and see if you like it. Consider subscribing. I'm a new channel, so I'm trying to grow my channel right now. I'm going to be trying different things. Some of it's going to work, some of it won't. And hopefully I learn, and if you have feedback for me, feel free to always send it over to me. I'm trying to get better and better at this as I go along. But without further ado, let's get into talking about the 5 strategies that's going to help you get better. Tip number 5. On the turn before you enter a room, consider playing an ability card that will give you some sort of a shield. Particularly, say you're playing a brute character that's one of these starting classes that has multiple abilities with shield on it. If you know that you're going to be opening a doorway and going into a new room, revealing additional enemies that may be attacking you, that's a great opportunity to play a shield card. One of the challenges with shield is that it's unpredictable whether or not you're going to have the shield in place before the enemy's attack. In many cases, faster moving enemies may actually attack before your shield is out, and it sort of ends up being a waste. By playing a shield ability when you go through a doorway, you're able to activate that ability before the enemy's attack, even if they have a lower initiative. And it's a great way to take advantage of those abilities and make sure that they're in place, and also absorb some damage when you're entering a room that is very likely to be filled with many monsters that are going to attack you. Tip number 4. Consider ways that you can take advantage of initiative to get 2 turns out of a single status effect. What I mean by that is, most status effects will last until the end of your next turn, or in an enemy's case, the end of their next turn. And what you can do is you can play fast and slow initiatives on back-to-back turns in order to get multiple rounds worth of abilities off while that effect is active. Let me give you an example. So you could use an item like the Cloak of Invisibility to give your character invisibility. And if you use that early on turn 1, that means you may be invisible for all of the enemy's attacks that turn. And if on the next turn, you play an ability with a very late initiative, you may also still be invisible for the rest of the enemy's attacks that turn. You're basically getting 2 rounds of invisibility out of 1 ability. Tip number 3. If you have a negative status effect like Stun, Disarm, or Immobilize that was added after your last turn, then at the beginning of the round, consider maybe long resting sooner than you otherwise would have. If you're going to just play 2 cards and you're not really going to get anything out of them, it may be better to long rest, get 2 hit points back, refresh some of your items, and get the rest of the cards from your discard back to your hand. Tip number 2. If you're fighting enemies that summon additional monsters, try to use the terrain and other areas of the map to your advantage in order to prevent their summoning. So what I mean by that is, in order for a summon to be successful, the summoning creature needs to have an adjacent hex completely unoccupied and empty in order to be able to summon that additional enemy. This means that you can stack up enemies next to each other, you can stack your party up around, you can use traps, other obstacles, walls, and even coins or treasure. Those count as items that will occupy a hex. And in Gloomhaven, you can't summon a monster onto a hex that has a coin on it. You can use all of those things to your advantage to prevent summoning. This goes not only for regular normal monsters, but also some bosses that will summon additional enemies to fight against you. Use these things to your advantage. The game was designed with that in mind, and if you can prevent summoning, that can go a long way to swinging the fight in your favor. Now, I will note that this is going to be changing in Frosthaven. At least the latest information we have is that in the future, Frosthaven will allow enemies to summon on top of hexes that have coins. And last but not least, tip number 1. Remember what type of game Gloomhaven is. Many people come into Gloomhaven and they sort of look at this like a dungeon crawler, some board game version of Dungeons and Dragons, or a board game version of an old video game RPG. That's not what it is. It's a resource management game. And the number 1 resource that you're managing through every scenario is your hand and the number of cards in your hand. This isn't like a Dungeons and Dragons game where you can slow roll it and you can play defensively and sort of work through combat at whatever pace fits the party that you're playing in. It doesn't really work that way. You have a limited number of cards, and you're going to run out of those cards. The question is, can you complete the scenario's objective before those cards run out? And the slower you play through the scenario, the more likely you are to run out of cards. You sort of have a time limit, and you're working against the clock. And so the other thing is you need to look at your hit points, not like hit points in the traditional sense, but hit points are really just a buffer that prevents you from having to discard additional cards. So you think of your hit points that way as a shield or something that protects you from having to discard cards. They're an additional resource that you can use to your advantage. So don't be afraid to take hits and to lose hit points, but also know that if you lose too many, then you have to start eating into your cards. That speeds up the timer before you'd exhaust out, and it lowers the amount of time you have to complete the scenario. So the most important thing that you can take away from this is the best defense is a good offense. The faster you can shoot through monsters, get to the end of the scenario, and complete your objective, the more likely you are to do it. Another great resource to help with this concept is the Gloomhaven Stamina Exhaustion Calculator and the Gloomhaven Stamina and Exhaustion Guide from BoardGameMath. These resources do a great job of helping you to understand how many rounds maximum each starting class will have and how many rounds you lose by using lost cards earlier in a scenario. It also helps you understand the concept where if you play rounds defensively, trying to avoid damage or position yourself in a certain way to set up another round, that can really minimize and take away from the very limited number of rounds that you have and might not be the best use of your time to meeting the objective of the scenario. So those are my top 5. What are some other strategies that you use in your campaign? Leave a comment below to let me and other viewers know. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, and if you want to see more of my content, please subscribe so you can be notified when I post new videos. Thanks, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.